Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, we got a lot of Leaf stuff to churn through. A lot of things happening between Sunday's game against the Jets and yesterday's game against the Blue Jackets. And it's basically what led this week's edition of 32 Thoughts, where Friedman is detailing how both of the teams have felt about the situation so far, where the Leafs are upset because they felt that the situation wouldn't have escalated any further if there was just a penalty assessed on the play, where Neil Pionk need Rasmus Sandin, whether it be a minor or a major like the one that was assessed in yesterday's game between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Winnipeg Jets, where Mark Scheifele was on the receiving end of a dangerous knee-on-knee play, that Jason Spezza wouldn't have felt the need to go out and do what he did. And that's not me trying to justify what Jason Spezza did. No, it was suspension worthy, and that's why he got suspended. But the Winnipeg Jets are upset about the situation as well because their guy, Neil Pionk, is in concussion protocol and more than likely going to miss more than just the 2 games that he's suspended for. And the Jets actually feel like the situation escalated because the Toronto Maple Leafs were complaining how that game was officiated throughout the entirety of it. And that's how they feel that that game got out of control. These two teams played each other 10 times last season. There's a bit of bad blood there, especially between the Leafs and Neil Pionk specifically, who tried to take out Mitch Marner on a nothing play early on in last year's season where there was an empty net. And the Leafs also have beef with the officiating crew here because, like we pointed out in the previous video, this is the same guy who refereed Game 2 in 2019 against Boston, where the game got so out of hand that Nazem Kadri eventually cross-checked Jake DeBrusk right in the face and was suspended for the second time in 2 years, completely out of the first round. That the Maple Leafs feel that that individual, the referee, Bradmere, however you say his name, cannot control a game. Let me know what your thoughts and opinions are down in the comment section below, because Elliotte Friedman did note that the only other comparable suspension that he could find was a James Neal knee from 2013, where he received 5 games on the play. So maybe the hope on appealing the suspension for Jason Spezza is that they can get that reduced from 6 games down to 5, but a league executive that Friedman got to comment on the situation was saying that appealing it would more than likely take more than just serving the 6-game suspension, and if that's the case, why? But moving on from that, Tuesday morning, Sheldon Keefe comes out with this comment. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think Austin Matthews has drawn a penalty all season, which is strange. And that's just Sheldon Keefe protecting his guy, right? Because that's a callback to Sunday night's game in the third period where Matthews and Dubois got tangled up in an altercation, and both of them received offsetting penalties for their involvement in that scrum. And Sheldon Keefe postgame in his comments felt that Dubois should have gotten the extra 2 minutes where Matthews shouldn't have gotten anything, that the Leafs should have came away from that play on the power play. And Evolving Wild over here on Twitter, noting that Matthews has actually drawn 4 penalties this year, but goes on to clarify in another tweet that if you exclude the offsetting minor on Dubois there, it's actually only 3 calls this year. And if we take a look at the rate that Matthews has drawn penalties prior to this season, there's a significant difference between the two. Moving off of the dramatics, there was a hockey game yesterday, and prior to that game, a slew of injury announcements came from the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was announced yesterday that Mitch Marner would be out 3 to 4 weeks with a shoulder injury, one that he sustained in practice from a Jake Muzzin hit. And I guess the line is that you play how you practice, and Jake Muzzin really must want to play well because he's coming into practice just absolutely amped up. But Jake, can you lighten up just a little bit, and can you bring this sort of intensity in the game? Because Mitch Marner was on absolute fire before this, and just seeing him play hockey over the last 2 weeks during this extended winning streak where the Maple Leafs are 16-3-1 in their last quick maths 20 games, I believe that is. He's just having so much fun out there, and to get that version of Mitch Marner back and to have him just go out for 3 to 4 weeks, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough. Travis Dermott also dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury. Rasmus Sandin going to miss the next 2 or 3 weeks or so. Peter Mrazek is not back just yet. Ilya Mikheyev is not back just yet. The injuries are starting to pile up for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But before the game yesterday, it was announced that the Maple Leafs recalled a couple of players from the Toronto Marlies, defenseman Christian Rubens and Alex Biega and forward Alex Steeves. Alex Steves with 12 points in 12 games and 7 goals in his first professional season out of college. Nothing to scoff at. He's not a small guy, but he's not a big guy either. 5'11", 185 pounds. He's a very, very smart player with and without the puck and has a nose for the net. So I'm not going to complain with him getting the call, but a lot of people did wonder if Josh Hosang was going to be the one that was called up. We talked about this in a video last week, but for Josh Hosang to get called up to the Toronto Maple Leafs, he would first need to sign an NHL deal, and that's not a problem. The Maple Leafs have the space and the room to sign him to an NHL deal, but a lot of people were worried about re-entry waivers, but that's not a factor with him. He could just be signed to a deal and called up and inserted into the lineup. But we also talked about in that video that it only makes sense to go through that process if there's a long-term spot open for him with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Because let's just hypothetically say that this Mitch Marner injury is only 3 or 4 games. That's not enough time to properly evaluate what you have in Josh Hosang at the NHL level. And after this hypothetical injury, I'm not saying that his actual injury is only going to be 3 or 4 games. If Mitch Marner were to come back and they would need to send Josh Hosang back down for either roster constraints or cap considerations, he would then need to clear through waivers. And if he's good enough to be on the Toronto Maple Leafs right now, he's also not bad enough to not get claimed by anyone on waivers. I'm not confident with just rolling the dice because Josh Hosang is an asset at this point that is boom or bust. And if he booms, I don't want that to be with any other team than the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially after his words and him saying that he finally feels that he's in a place where he feels welcome and comfortable and like he is understood as both a player and a person. I don't want to rush that. I want to be able to put him in the best possible position to succeed. And with Sheldon Keefe ending that quote on the update with Mitch Marner saying 3 to 4 weeks, but sooner rather than later, maybe they feel that the injury is not as serious and he can be back in a shorter amount of time. And if it's not the long-term opportunity, like I'm talking 10, 15 games to really get a sense of what the Leafs have in this guy, I don't want to yo-yo him around. Christian Zrubin's the defenseman that was recalled that got to play in last night's game, 6'5" and 227 pounds. That's something that's going to get people out of their seat. And this is a guy who's really, really easy to cheer for. He's a journeyman in the sense that he was signed by the Maple Leafs' East Coast Hockey League affiliate team out of junior, earned himself a spot there, earned himself a spot with the Toronto Marlies, earned himself a spot to be one of the first few players named to Team Latvia at this year's Olympics, and now he's earned himself a spot and consideration from the Toronto Maple Leafs to be that first defenseman up when there's an injury. I shot my buddy Nick Barden a text yesterday just asking what kind of a player Christian Zrubins is because Nick does an awesome job reporting on the Toronto Marlies, so I'll leave his YouTube and his Twitter account linked in the description here. And what Nick had to say about him is that he uses his size to stay on the right side of the puck, but is also sneaky quick for how big he is. And from what I've gathered from following the Toronto Marlies this year is that they absolutely love this guy. We remember all the song and praise that Zach Hyman got when he was down there, where when they were reviewing video, they would always point and say, look what Zach did here. This sounds like another example of that. And I'm not setting Christian Zrubins up or saying that he's going to be the defenseman version of Zach Hyman and come out of nowhere here. But what I am saying is that they really do believe in his abilities. And Greg Moore, the Toronto Marlies head coach, has said that they've played him on the left and the right side this year and that he feels confident in doing so. If we're taking a look at the line combination from last night's game, Wayne Simmonds continuing to stick with Austin Matthews and Michael Bunting on that top line with Mitch Marner out, and that is deserved. Wayne Simmonds seems to be getting better and better as the season goes on, and Michael Bunting is on an absolute heater ever since he got promoted back up to that top line, and Austin Matthews is absolutely on fire right now. Kerfoot, Tavares, and Nylander, they continue to roll with the punches, and Nick Ritchie scoring his first goal in yesterday's game, and he's got 6 points in his last 8 games, and he's really showing why the Toronto Maple Leafs signed him in the first place. He was getting into it with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and the only shift that he had in the third period and like the final 10 minutes or so. He's a guy who's really endearing himself and starting to produce. And it's not that I never believed in him. I was frustrated with him because I knew that he could be better than what he was to start the season. And he's finally doing that. And It's awesome. It's awesome to see that come together. It was never, I don't like Nick Ritchie. It was, I don't like the way that Nick Ritchie is playing right now, and if he doesn't improve, well, then that may be a problem. I didn't get to mention it in my previous video because there was just so many things going on, but Kyle Clifford played well against the Blue Jackets, and in that Sunday game against the Jets, had a fight. He definitely did not need to do that. He is not a full-time player with this Maple Leaf team. He doesn't owe them anything. They acquired him for basically nothing. He was with the Marlies for a couple of games, and he more than likely loses his spot in the lineup here if everyone is healthy. But I respect him because when there's a job that needs to be done, he does it. And to have guys like that around and to be able to call upon him when you need him is valuable. So I respect Kyle Clifford tremendously for that on Sunday, and I'm sure the coaching staff and Kyle Dubas feel the same way. If you're curious about the cap situation for the Maple Leafs in both the long term and the short term, the long term is complicated. We're not going to touch on that at the end of this video. But in the short term, if a guy like Travis Dermott comes back and you send down a guy like Christian Rubens, you still don't have enough money to activate Peter Mrazek off of LTIR, and he looks ready to return after having a conditioning stint with the Toronto Marlies in the one game. It didn't really go so well, but it's a conditioning stint. Depending on how the Mitch Marner injury progresses in the coming days or coming weeks, whenever they would need the cap space, if it's going slower than expected or not sooner rather than later, like Sheldon Keefe put it, they could just place him on long-term injury reserve retroactively to when he was hurt. And the LTIR requirements is that you be on there for a minimum of 10 games and 24 days on the calendar. And he's already missed 3 games in about 5 or 6 days or so. And in placing Mitch Marner on LTIR retroactively, that basically gives them enough flexibility to do whatever they want in the short term. It allows them to activate Peter Mrazek. It allows them to activate Ilya Mikheyev when he comes back. It allows them to see how the injuries to Travis Dermott and Rasmus Sandin progress. It allows them to maybe even carry 3 goalies. It allows them to do basically whatever they want. Because remember, when everyone is healthy, the Leafs are actually over the salary cap. And that's what we've been discussing over the last little while now, because if everyone were to be healthy at the same time, they would be forced to make a move by either placing somebody on waivers or making a trade. And that's why guys like Justin Holl and Travis Dermott have been in trade rumors the last little while. Not so much now, because these injuries have allowed them to basically kick this can down the road. And just to touch on yesterday's game really quickly, because I don't want to make the video too long here, but they were up 5-1 heading into the third period, and that's when I believe the Jason Spezza news dropped. And I don't want to say that was the reason why they allowed 3 unanswered goals in the third period. I don't want to just chalk it up to that, but Jason Spezza is an important piece to this team on and off the ice, and I can understand how that news would be a little bit disappointing, right? But no excuses. You have to be able to rally and you have to be able to play a full 60 minutes. And Sheldon Keefe came out post-game and said that he didn't like anything about yesterday's game. So that's how the coach felt about it. But 2 guys making their NHL debut, some unfortunate news coming down in the middle of it. Guys playing up and down all over the place and in unfamiliar positions on a Tuesday night. I'll take it. So that's going to be the end of this video, guys. Make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And Thursday night against the Lightning, going to be another tough game for the Leafs. Let's see how they respond without Mitch Marner or without Jason Spezza.